Alright, hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in once again to the Black Box Podcast. BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you this week from Montreal. Okay, now let's talk about the 1981 murder of Marcia King, formerly known as the Buckskin Girl, but in early 2018 she was identified as Marcia King of Little Rock, Arkansas, thanks to DNA. And I need to give a big shout out to CY0031, that's a YouTube username, and CY and I had the chance to discuss this theory via correspondence. We've been going back and forth about what happened to Marcia King, and let's go through a few of the possibilities that we're dealing with here. Now, let's just give a little bit of background information. Marcia King was found on the side of a highway outside of Miami, Ohio. This is out off of an interstate. She was found in the grass. She was wearing no shoes. She had excellent hygiene. No recent sexual activity, which the autopsy confirmed. Moreover, she was wearing a very noticeable buckskin poncho. And if I remember correctly, the person who noticed her actually only saw the buckskin poncho first and thought that somebody had left a garment just in the grass on the side of the road, and after approaching her found out that this was indeed a body, and that, became an unidentified case for over 35 years, and for just during that time, she was known as the Buckskin Girl, but now she's been identified as Marcia King. Well, CY and I have been discussing the possibility that Marcia King was murdered by a long-haul trucker. And I think the easiest way to discuss this theory is if I just read off some of CY's comments and we can have a little bit of a discussion. CY writes here, and I quote, "I would like to start out saying my brother was an interstate trucker, and I have worked in the towing auto repair field. This does not make me an expert, but I do have some background with the trucking industry. I think Miss King worked as a co-driver. This doesn't mean that she drove the truck, but she may have. But as a co-driver, she would be worth her weight in gold. She would have helped in keeping the driver's log and other paperwork, navigation, no GPS at the time." Okay, one of the big things to say about that is, I remember days before GPS. Maybe you do too. Absolutely, we relied on navigators. As a kid, that was the big thing you did. If you sat in the front seat, you had to read the maps and the road atlas, and I had to tell my mom, take a left turn or a right turn or look out for this road. And yeah, absolutely, before GPS. I don't really know how we survived back then, because I was absolutely terrible at reading maps, but you needed somebody to do that for you, because you couldn't read a map and drive at the same time. Yeah, I totally think that this is a very big possibility. CY continues, "A young girl's ability to talk forever could get on someone's nerves, but not a long-haul trucker. It would keep him alert and awake and focused. She was good at this based on her good health and appearance. She also would have helped when unloading a truck, and the driver would help supervise the unloading when she took care of the paperwork in the office." Okay, let's stop right here for a second. Who wouldn't want to take Marcia King with them on a long-haul trucking journey? Who wouldn't want that? I mean, absolutely, I can't really think of any trucker that would not want Marcia King to go with them, so I follow you completely. I don't really know if we can get the exact details of all the activities she did with the trucker, if she indeed was working as the co-driver, as CY suggests. But I think this is a very good starting point, because there are a lot of supporting points to this trucker theory that we're going to get into. CY continues, "Now, after one trip was over, she most likely bounced from one driver to another truck at stops or trucking terminals. This was good until she met her last driver." Okay, let's talk about that for a second. We have a body that's found on the side of the road, and when they conducted palynology tests on Marcia's clothing and the chemical tests on her undergarments that revealed, the soot particles from various parts of the country, the pollen that was found on her clothing was from the Southwest, but the soot particles were from kind of the New England mid-Atlantic area. Marcia had been all over North America. She had been near the U.S.-Mexico border, and she had been near the mid-Atlantic New England states, possibly New York City even. So this would explain everything about how she was able to get from point A to point B. My original first instinct was that Marcia had been traveling with kind of a group, maybe musicians, but younger people, and I only thought that because of her age. But the ability to maintain excellent hygiene with no recent sexual activity, now, I think CY's theory is kind of more supporting of that. And in my first uploads on Marcia King, I suggested that my own original idea was I had to scrap that whole thing that she's traveling with younger people, like a group of younger people. No, I really think that she was traveling with somebody older, and I said late 40s, early 50s. Well, that's definitely fitting the profile of what CY is talking about. So if we put those two things together, it's like she was traveling with a man. I'm still getting that vibe. Late 40s, early 50s, and he was a long-haul trucker. I could really get that kind of feeling about the age, but I didn't quite know exactly how it would have matched up. But CY has given us a very good suggestion. We have a more recent comment from CY, though, when she says something in response to a proposition that I made. I said, "What do you think about the possibility that the trucker demanded sex, and she said no, and that led to his aggression?" CY writes, "Okay, since you asked, I think you're absolutely right about what happened," meaning that my theory that this man demanded some sort of sexual act, or he made some sort of advance on her, Marcia got really mad, something of that nature. And CY continues, "I think this may have happened in a truck stop or in a terminal or the motel, somewhere in public when this happened. My guess is that it happened inside of the truck cab. My guess was that it was inside of the truck cab when the attack happened. Miss King started screaming, and he panicked, and first tried to choke her. Then, when, she started to fight back, he hit her head with a flashlight or a tire buddy, which is a common trucker tool. Also, check out the case of Benet Ramsey." Yeah, okay, I've covered the case of Benet Ramsey on this channel. Yeah, absolutely. We've learned that a single strike with a blunt object can cause an enormous amount of damage. The question to ask is, what led to this? I think Miss King got involved with truckers because not only it got her away from home, but also gave her validation from older men, something she may not have ever had. As for her killers, I think he regretted the action. This was no expert. This was no expert indeed. That's one thing where CY and I are in complete agreement. I don't think this was a serial killer. I don't believe that this was, a serious predator. I believe that this was somebody who was, in an awkward situation. It got out of hand, and maybe CY has laid it out perfectly. I mean, I think her theory makes absolute perfect sense, that it got out of control. He grabbed her by the neck, and then she freaks out even worse, so he strikes her in the head with an object. This is just, a crime that got out of control, and he did something horrible. And one of the supporting points that CY writes is, first, he left her somewhere she could easily be found. He could have just dumped her body off an interstate highway guardrail, where it might have taken years to find her. No, he left her in a place where somebody would find her. What was it, 1 or 2 days at the most? And he left her in an area which he was probably familiar with. My sort of theory about what happened to that, if we are looking at this trucker theory, is that the trucker probably just threw Marcia from the cab, and she probably rolled a little bit, and that was how she ended up in the curled fetal position. Okay, and the biggest thing that I think supports that is, I believe that this was not a professional, but what I think happened was, he's driving down the road and he's just waiting for a time when there are no cars on either side. He's waiting for there just to be absolutely no traffic, pitch black in the middle of the night, and he's like, where can I get rid of her body without anybody noticing? I mean, I agree with CY. I do think that the incident occurred inside the cab of the truck. We don't necessarily know all the specifics, but I really do not think this was a serial killer or anybody who had any idea or any experience with this type of behavior. Something got out of control, and this guy just tossed the body from the truck. disappeared into the middle of the night, never to be seen again. Okay, so let's read back the last part of the comment here. He didn't strip her and didn't pose her like the Black Dahlia. That's another big thing because, we're all familiar with the case of the Black Dahlia. There was no real torture. There was no, she wasn't humiliated. There wasn't, any sort of stripping that she talks about here. No, absolutely not. This was not some sort of kind of sadistic sex act. I mean, this was something more like, once again, a situation got out of control. They had some sort of dispute, and that erupted into aggression. CY continues. You talk of investigators, which means police, which means justice. This will never happen. This guy is long dead. If there is any physical evidence like bloodstains in the cab of the truck, that is also gone. The police may have thought along these lines, but they didn't even have a name for the victim. Where would they start? Today it would be a different story. Every toll booth is computerized, plus they take photos of vehicles and license plates, so they would have a starting place. Police in 1981 did not have these resources. Okay, now let's go through some of that. Is the killer of Marcia King still alive? We don't necessarily know, but even if I said that this is someone in their early 50s, if they were 50 years old when this happened, that was 37 years ago, he would be 87 today. He very well could still be alive. Furthermore, what if it's someone like 45 or something? They would be 82 years old. There is the possibility that this killer is still alive. Now, next point. CY brings up there would be no physical evidence left in the truck of the cab at this point. Left in the cab of the truck. There would be no physical evidence there. I completely agree with you, 100%. I think that is very, very true. We're not going to be relying on physical evidence in the cab of a truck to solve this one, if indeed that is what happened. This is just sort of a theory that CY and I have been discussing, but we don't know 100%, but I think it's very, very likely. We've talked about the possibility of having the police looking at what trucks were on the road in 1981 going through that exact area. We can look at that. And these records are preserved. Records are very well preserved. And, I haven't covered the case of Maria Riddle on this channel yet, but that is one that went back to the 1950s, and the true crime writers did an amazing job at pulling up very, very well-kept records of so many things. In that case, from the 1950s, to corroborate stories that people were telling in that case. So records from the 1980s do exist. We just have to find them, and they have to get through the archives and such. So I definitely think that we can explore that a little bit more. Another big thing is, if this killer is still alive, maybe we can rely on things such as a deathbed confession, now that Marcia King has been identified. Another thing to explore with that angle is, now that Marcia's name has been identified, I mentioned that if someone were 45 at that point, they would be 82 years old. Well, if Marcia had been traveling with other individuals and she's now been identified, there must be somebody that remembers her, trucker or not. I mean, she was traveling all over the country. There must be more people that will recognize her now that her name has been revealed, and these people can come forward to give some supporting points about what happened to Marcia King. But I do insist, I believe that CY's theory about how she was murdered by a long-haul trucker is the warmest lead that we have. And, it's very likely that this was an act of, kind of an unwanted advance of some sort, and it got out of control. Marcia panics. The guy grabs her around her neck. That makes her panic even worse. And then he strikes her in the head, and he's like, I made a really bad mistake. So then they take off from whatever place they were parked at, and, he waits until it's completely black, pitch black in the middle of the night or the early AM hours, and he throws her off the side of the road. And she rolls a little bit, and then she is found sometime after that, and was known as the Buckskin Girl for 37 years. That's what I believe happened, but we don't necessarily know 100%, and I'm always open to new information, And, like, if anybody has anything to say at all to contribute about this, please drop a comment below so we can discuss some things more. If you had anything to say at all, you can also hit the like button and subscribe if you want to hear more of this stuff. But most importantly, please drop some comments below so we can continue this discussion. Well, that's all for me now, and stay tuned, and until next time.